Does it look okay? Good. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, this will be recorded and I will have this up on YouTube and live hopefully by the end of the week. So if you missed part of it, or if you know somebody that wanted to attend and was unable to attend, we should have a direct link to this live on the grant website. But most definitely by the end of the week, I'll have it in my possession. And if you need to email me to get a link to this webinar. Again, thank you for attending. I'm not hoping to take up not too much of your time. This will probably take about a half hour, possibly even 20-25 minutes. The goal today is to just give you a broad overview of some of the common observations for the unsuccessful applicants. But perhaps more importantly for you to also just inform you of some of the changes for round two. I think we were pretty clear in round one that there might be some lessons learned. So there is some important information at the end of the webinar. So I encourage you to just stick around to the end to get an idea of what changes might affect you as a second round applicant. So with that, we'll jump right into it. First, some of you, or most of you in this webinar, I believe, received an email from me stating some of this, but just at a glance, I think it's helpful for perspective here. There were 364 applicants and 40 of which were funded. In dollar amounts, there was about $21 million requested and about $3.1 million were funded. For reference, it's going to be about the same amount for the second round, so approximately 3 million. I don't have the exact number, but you can expect the amount of money available for the second round is about the same. We had applications from all 16 counties, and applications from 13 counties were funded this time. 72% of the applicants had never applied or had received funding from the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan. I think personally that number was surprising to me in a very good way. There was some good participation. And lastly, 70% of the businesses that applied had fewer than 9 full-time employees or full-time employee equivalents. So with that, we will jump into some of the scoring criteria and some of the common feedback. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. First, the evaluation process. You were scored on 3 different evaluation criteria by evaluators. The strength of project plan, the potential to increase domestic sales, and your organization's capacity to execute your plan. There was also additional points for the location of the business and for the funding history of the business. A couple people emailed me this morning inquiring about if a lot of first-timers received funding, and the answer to that is yes, that was the case. Each criterion was scored from 1 to 5, in 3 being the default score. So the evaluators were instructed when they were evaluating you on the 3 criteria that are listed at the top of this slide, they were instructed to start at 3. If anybody has ever used a scoring rubric in any capacity, the accepted method is to start in the middle and let an application convince you that it belongs with a higher score than 3 or a lower score than 3. Each application had 3 evaluators. And lastly, if 2 of the evaluators disagreed by more than 3 points, that's 3 points total, the application was scored by a 4th evaluator. Criterion number 1, strength of project plan. We'll talk about the applications that were strong. Again, what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the evaluators' comments and I am synthesizing that data in those comments to the best of my ability. You are dealing with evaluators that are human, so I'm just taking the comments for what they are. Applications that were strong that seem to have higher scores. There was a specific event or use. There might have been a cost quote associated with the event or the use, and the market was clearly defined. Applications that fell short, proposal requested support for a current position or positions. To be very clear, staff time was an allowable use, but from looking at the evaluator feedback and the comments, it appeared to me that if there was an argument that there was a current staff position that was then going to pivot to a new, let's say, role of marketing or what have you, those tended not to score as high. If it felt like there was a funding of a current position or status quo, so to speak, those applications fell a little bit short. The consultants, again, allowable use, but if the consultant's task and scope was unclear, it was difficult for evaluators to really understand what was going to happen with the money. So an example might be if you were going to allocate $15,000 for a marketing consultant and that was the end of it, I think it was difficult for evaluators to score the activities of that consultant. And lastly, general terms such as B2B without too much explanation. For some of you in here, you've written many grants, and it's one of the things you do with grants is to essentially regurgitate some of the stuff that's in the guidelines. But I think that some of the evaluators had a hard time with more general terms. The next criterion 2 is the potential to increase domestic sales. I'll start with the right again, so we'll talk about where the applications were strong. There was a direct line from funding activity to increased sales. I think I said a few times on a webinar, a big, bright, direct line to the funded activity to the increased sales. Number 2, they provided at least some evidence, which could be math, logic, or the history of the business to frame the goals. We are well aware it's a short application. I understand that could have been frustrating to get everything in 2 pages, but there was some sort of evidence or at least a demonstration of history to say, hey, we think we can do this. We can actually meet these goals. And consistent details in the narrative and the budget. The narrative and the budget spoke directly to each other. You could find something in the 2-page application, you could point to it to the budget, and it made perfect sense. Where applications fell short, unclear market, target, or customer. I think there was lots of activities or perhaps initiatives, but the way that who that was going to reach exactly or what that target was exactly was not well defined. Funding current marketing efforts, in parentheses, not a new initiative. There were plenty of applications that were going to the trade shows, let's say, that they went to last year and the year before. And remember that this criterion says potential to increase the domestic sales. So I think some evaluators felt as if they were funding really good marketing activities and really good sales-driven activities, but they didn't differentiate much from what they had been done in the past, it was hard to argue that those would increase the domestic sales. And then lastly, this was one that happened quite a bit, was contingent on other factors in funding. So it wasn't clear if this money was going to actually work immediately without, let's say, another grant application or another round of funding or something else happening in order to trigger everything. Essentially, there may have been a domino effect that it was unclear if that was going to happen. Criterion number 3, where they were strong. So again, in the right-hand side of your screen, your organization's capacity to do the proposal, an organization's experience, or the detail of the plan. I think applicants fell in 2 clear categories, either an established organization that was a well-oiled machine that could execute many of the activities, or an organization's recognition that, hey, this is brand new and this isn't necessarily something we've done before, but this is how we're going to do it. And those 2 things tend to essentially equally impress the evaluators. This was a big one with evaluators. A common comment was there was a clear explanation of what person was doing what and when they were doing it. So if we had a small team of 5 or even a large team of 250, you could point out very specifically this person or this title is going to do X, Y, and Z activity. And lastly, general human capital. I think it did, from looking at from the comments, I think giving some explanation of what your staff was capable of or their experience, it appeared to me, looking at the comments, that helped some of the stronger applications. Where they fell short. I'm going to skip right to the 3rd bullet real quick. I think this was one of the, it was almost, I don't want to call it an ignored criterion, but it was one that wasn't mentioned sometimes. So the third bullet just says no mention of capacity at all. When somebody is scoring off of a rubric, they are looking for these three things very specifically. Because remember, they're starting at 3 and they're either going to go to 4 or 5, they're going to stay at 3, or they're going to go to 2 and 1. And if there's no mention of capacity of the organization, it's difficult for an evaluator to essentially say, oh, I see that, and now let me evaluate it. I'd even suggest that that's probably true with all three of these categories, something to be aware of for the second round. No mention of the track record or the existing team. And lastly, consultant-heavy applications were difficult to evaluate. I think it was tough for evaluators to look at consultant-heavy applications and know exactly about the capacity of that said consultant, and then also the organization. With that, there are some significant changes for round 2, which are worth discussing. And it's very possible that we've spent the last 12 minutes and you said to yourself, I think I nailed all 3 of those criteria, and I don't know where I could improve. So there's 2 things I would say to that is, number 1, remember it was 10% of the applications. So as good as all these applications were, it came down to very, very thin margins. But number 2, there are some changes to round 2 that are probably more significant to you as a first-time applicant looking ahead to the second round. So there's a couple of big bullets here. Number 1, a maximum of 50% of the grant funding ask can be used for staff time. So the funding of staff is still allowable, but it is capped at 50% of the grant ask. Even though funding of staff was allowable, I think it's fair to say that a huge percentage of the ask going to staff time did not perform well with the evaluators, and this is a reaction to that. Number 2, collaborative initiatives are going to be limited to a $100,000 ask. Many of you in here probably are not collaborative initiatives. Collaborative initiatives are organizations that are applying together, and the previous limit was $250,000. That's a lot of money. This is an effort to free up more money and to get more awardees. So collaborative initiatives are limited to $100,000. Third, this is pretty important. The templates are not they're the same, but their instructions are different. So if you look at the current templates and you're going to redo an application, there are more rigid guidelines. There is no leeway with the length of the application. It must be under 2 pages. There's other guidelines there that are just straight up qualifying guidelines, and it will not be evaluated if it doesn't fit those. So I encourage you just to look at the new templates. They are live on the website, and you can check that out as well. And before I go to the next few, it's probably a good time to mention that the round is open. It was open yesterday. So I am going to, real quick, I'm just going to try to chat here. So I think everybody should be able to see this. This is a thing you've seen in chat if you've attended any of my webinars. So I put the most relevant thing right at the top. That is the governor's press release that went live yesterday afternoon at about 3 p.m. Within that press release, you can, several of you to ask to see a list of awardees. It is in that press release. So it is linked in that press release, so you can go find it yourself. What's also linked in that press release is the same landing page that we've always used, but with updated information. So if you read this press release, that can be a top line way for you to dig deeper and deeper into some of the questions that you've asked and to get to the information. But again, I will say the round 2 is live, and it will close on April 11th at 5 p.m., which is a Thursday. Thursday, April 11th at 5 p.m. And that's the new deadline. So there's about a month and a half to 2 months that you have to work with. Okay, back to the screen in front of you. There is now going to be initial evaluation criterion. It will be the alignment with Maine's 10-year economic development strategy. So it's in blue for a reason. If you look at back to what we talked about before, these 3 blue criteria were what you were evaluated the first time. There is now going to be a 4th criterion, which will be the alignment with Maine's 10-year economic development strategy. It's still on a scale of 1 to 5. It will still be scaled on a rubric that will start at 3, and they will be moved off 1 and 2 to 4 or 5. If you ask yourself, hey, I don't know what the 10-year economic development strategy is, I believe there is a link directly to that on the press release. And you can click right there and you can read it. So you can, a beautiful strategy would be for you to open that up, spend some time with the 10-year economic development strategy, look at your application and say, okay, hey, here's an opportunity for me to boost my score. If you're one of the people that feel like you didn't get a good enough boost because of your location or your funding history, this dilutes those other bonuses and gives more of the score essentially to the evaluation process and less of it to the location. Which brings me to the fifth bullet here is there's going to be a refinement to the consideration of the location of the business. I'm going to direct you to the guidelines. There's brand new guidelines that are posted. A lot of it's the same. You can go ahead and look at the scoring criteria. But the long and the short of the location bonus, if you are in a affluent county, but you have a supply chain that actually interacts with most of Maine, that location, you will have more of a location bonus than you did the first time. And now lastly, the sixth bullet, which I'm going to refine on the next slide. But the sixth bullet is that there is an option to just roll over your current application with no action. So if you're hearing what I've said and you think that your application is very strong and the fourth and fifth bullet here are going to be very advantageous to you, you're going to automatically be re-entered into the second round, and you do not have to essentially rework your application. To be very clear, it is everybody's right to submit a new application. The portal's the same. You'll have to just submit a new application and it will replace the current one that's in there. But on the back end, all of the 326 applicants that were not funded, they will automatically be rolled over with the same score you received on the first round, but with these two additional tweaks to the new program. So there is the option to essentially roll it over if you need to. And with that, the last slide is I'm going to spend, it's a lot of text, so I apologize, but this is taken straight from a purposeful language to just give a little bit more clarity around it. So I'm just going to read it. A lot of it I've said, but it's worth reading it. It might be worth you screenshotting it if it's up on your screen. After the close of the first round of the grants, the DECD has determined to carry forward the previous non-approved applications to the second round. So again, 326 applications are technically already in the books. After we complete this webinar, those applicants may revise your application and resubmit for consideration if you want to revise it. Thus, a new application will be essentially submitted. To be clear, I'm not going to send you your old application, right? You have your templates in that they were in Word document, they were in Word format in the beginning. I encourage you to look at the new templates. They're all very, very similar. That's on you to rework your application and resubmit it. So if you're going to resubmit your application, I'm not going to release anything to you. But if you submit a new application, that will replace the one I have in the system. But I'm not going to release your old one. Your old one is in PDF form. It's on the back end. You want to bring up your old Word docs that you worked with, edit them accordingly, resave them as PDFs and resubmit it, and that will replace it. And if you do that and you would like me to confirm with you, I will do that. But I'm not going to, there won't be any action on my end to release the application back to you. If you decide round one applicant decides not to revise your application, their previous application will enter the second round with the existing score with the two new criteria with location and the changed location criteria and the alignment with the 10-year economic development strategy. All second round application scoring will reflect the updated criteria, which includes refinements to the consideration of location and alignments with the 10-year economic development strategy. And what we've talked before, all round two applications will be reviewed on the scoring criteria detailed on the new guidelines. So check out the website. And then finally, like I've said, is all applications are due April 12th at 5 p.m. I think I said the 11th. I apologize. So it will be April 12th at 5 p.m. As always, I'm available at that email and we have the website, but I put it in chat. And before I sign off, Ellen, is there anything that you wanted to add before I sign off?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the deadline is Thursday, April 11th. So I apologize. That was my typo.
Yeah.
We did close a round on a Thursday as opposed to a Friday, given some of the experience we had in the first round.
Yes, thank you. So yes, it's much easier to be responsive for everybody trying to get their application in when we're on a Thursday and not a Friday at midnight. I think if some of you realize that I believe we had Friday at 11:59 p.m., we want to be able to help you. We want to be able to help you take care of it. So with that, that's the
I'll
general.
also
Yep, go ahead.
mention, Paul, I'm sorry. There were some comments in the chat around people interested in seeing their scores. So I didn't know if you wanted to respond to that, or if folks had questions from the webinar, if they should email those to you directly.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say shoot me an email. I think somebody asked about if this is available. This will be available. I gotta download it and then I re-upload it to YouTube. So if you want to email me directly tomorrow or the next day, I'll just throw you the link. I know Ellen's going on vacation for a little bit, so it will be live on the website probably next week, but I should have a link to it in a couple of days. If you would like your evaluator feedback, you can email me. I will do my best to give you your comments. And again, I would encourage you to also look to the future here with some of the new changes in the program. There are 320 denied applications. So like I said, we have it on the back end, and I think I've probably talked to most of you in here. You know, I'll hustle for you, but just give me the grace of turning it around on time. And then I think somebody asked if previous grant funding affects scoring. It did. I think it's right in the guidelines. If everybody takes time especially the new on the website, if you look at the new guidelines that are published, there's a scoring criteria, which there were in the previous one, but there's a refined scoring criteria. So spend some time with that to give you an idea of what it looks like. And with that, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm not going to do a ton of live Q&A. I will be honest with you. There's 104 people in the audience. And I think it is best suited if you have questions, go ahead and email me. And I will do my best to respond to you in a timely manner. For most of you or a lot of you, I hope you're enthused by the new criteria and the new opportunity here. I think some applications have a really good chance with some of the previous work, the groundwork they've laid. And again, I will be available. I'm going to stop the webinar. I will record it and hopefully have it live and turn it over within 24 hours. So with that, thank you everybody for attending. And I will leave with the last bit of information is my contact information. And one more time in chat, I will just put everything I put in the beginning. Again, if you've been to any of my webinars, you have these, but the top link there is probably the one as previous applicants you should click on. It'll give you a lot of the information that you want to know, and it'll let you drill down into some of the more specifics. Thanks, everybody, and I'm sure I will talk to some of you soon.